Hello and welcome to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host Gary Morgan. With me, as always, my good friend Jim Stamm. How you doing, my brother?
Doing good, man. I got a nice winter beard started. You got new glasses, I think. Like those look
Yeah,
those look pretty sweet, dude.
yeah. The other one's busted like literally right after we got done recording last week.
Well, yeah, you locked your wife out of the house and your glasses got broken. I know how this works.
Well, that's quite the delayed reaction. Then that's been a couple weeks now, but um, no, dude. Actually, she took that in surprisingly good humor. Like so good that I was like, "What did you do while you were away?"
Right.
You know what I mean? Like.
That's when you have to pull up the old credit card and look at it and see how much shopping's been done.
I don't look at that, man. I enjoy being happy and stupid. So the postseason is in full swing. We already know that the American League has come down to Houston and Texas. I mean, that side of the bracket itself is a storyline, Jim. I
Yeah.
mean, and let's start there a little bit because the Orioles really didn't even give Texas a challenge, did they? That series did not go as I expected. I didn't think maybe the Orioles had enough pitching to go all the way, but I thought they had enough to not kind of just get beaten back by Texas like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Orioles, I mean, it'd be interesting if I was a fan of the Orioles. I wonder how the fan base is taking it. It's easier for me to sit back and say, well, look, man, huge progress. How many more wins did they have than they had last year? They've got tons of talent. This is just the beginning. So I look at it and think huge success for them. But I don't know what their fan base is thinking. I was a little surprised, like you, I think, that they didn't put up more of a fight. But they're a young team, and this was their first taste of it. I mean, they have a lot of young guys.
I think, like I said on Twitter, you know, I, I'm not going to say that this isn't to say that they weren't a good team because they were, but you knew that they were going to get bounced early, right? I mean, it just felt like they were a little too young, a little bit too many places to just go into the playoffs and just take off.
Yeah,
Like a cast iron skillet, I think teams need some seasoning.
yeah, that was a good analogy. I wish I had thought of it.
Hi there, Daniel. How you doing? So, I don't know. I
Well,
guess like I'd be probably on the fence a little bit if I'm an Orioles fan. They've waited a long time too. You finally get, a huge season. The kids all come through. It's the perfect storm of what you're trying to do if you're going with the tank and rebuild formula,
yeah,
right? They have pulled it off, and heck, they don't even have Jackson Holiday here yet.
I'm wondering real quick as we're talking here. I'm going to look up. I want to see what their payroll is and what they're projected to be, because maybe that'll tie in a little bit about what we want to talk about today, right?
Yeah,
With some of these teams.
right. Like here's Daniel wants to know: do you think that the extended wild card games affect the teams? Yeah, yeah, I do. We talked a little bit about that last week, Jim, and we wanted to get into it a little bit more here in this
Hmm.
episode because the overriding focus of this episode is getting there versus getting it done. And Jim has the perception. I'll let him verbalize it himself, but
No,
it's
good.
more or less that teams are maybe settling for just getting to the playoffs, or you see that happening.
I think baseball unintentionally builds that into things, maybe. I think that you're looking at teams that in Baltimore may be a real good case, or there'll be an interesting one to watch because you're doing it, you're building it, you've got all this talent, and then you decide how far you want to take it, right? Or how much more do you want to do to strengthen your position? And so I just think that because there's been some randomness in the postseason, that it's kind of got teams to maybe not want to push the gas pedal all the way down, especially if you have some financial considerations to which we know some teams do, that you have to keep an eye on things not only now but in the future. And so I just think that there's a push and a pull inward with some of these organizations, that it's a factor whether you see it or not, and we don't have any way to prove it, but other than just the fact that could they have done more? Should they have done more? I mean, this goes all the way back to when the Pirates were in the wild card, and Bob Nutting had said, "Well, I wish we would have done a little bit more that season."
So before we go back to that,
Yeah.
let me press back a little bit just to kind of help understand your position here, because when you say, like, should the Orioles, for instance, they're the for instance team here, should they have done more? Well, when? I mean, they won 100 games. So, like, what should have led them to believe they weren't good enough, besides the prevailing baseball wisdom saying you need some veterans, you know? Is that kind of what you mean, like at the deadline, or should they have done it before the season?
I would look at the Orioles as a specific case of what are you planning to do from here forward with it, maybe more with them specifically. I see that their payroll, and I was trying to find it. It looks like it was around 70 million this year. So I guess what I'm getting at is I don't want too much of the teams in Major League Baseball to adopt the strategy of let's just get in and see how it goes. And I think that that's kind of where we're at with it. I don't even have a problem, Gary, with the postseason this year. It's been great. But I'm talking the bigger picture here with all the teams. And so
don't you think, to a degree, the way that the talent is distributed in Major League Baseball, that's kind of just because there's not enough to go around? I mean, I don't think that you can look to build a perfect team anymore. You know what I mean?
no, I don't think you can either. I agree. There's only so many impact guys out there. But I think what it does in my mind, and maybe people disagree with this, is that it ends up to me hurting the players more in the long run, just in the sense of I want teams to be going for it as much as they possibly can. And I think that there's just a randomness to it that makes that too big of the equation for how teams are factoring in about how they're going to get there and what they're planning on doing once they're close. Does
All
that
right.
make sense?
It makes more sense to me, but I still think that we can explore this a little further, because specifically with a team like the Pirates, I need to understand exactly what you think they're capable of before we start having this conversation. So let's take a quick break, and when we come back from that, we'll do that. And Yark's got a good question here too I want to get to.
Oh boy.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
All right, so we're back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. And we're trying to, first of all, I think we've clarified Jim's position a little bit here. He's more worried about the overall game as it goes forward, seeing teams basically say, I need to build an 85-win team here. I don't need to worry about trying to win the league, because once I get in, I got as good a chance as anybody, and that's going to be $100 million cheaper than somebody else. I guess the reason that I was struggling to understand your position is because I was trying to think of it from Pirates' perspective. They're not going to play with these big boys no matter what.
Sure.
So I guess what is their mechanism for you to feel like they've done enough? Because you even called back to like the middle of the last decade a little bit. And I understand that and I agree with it. And that's what Bob Nutting himself said. I felt that. Remember, we even had debated whether we meant on the front end or the back end. Right?
Yeah. I think whatever the iron's most hot, I guess.
Right. So here's the team right now. Going into next year, you're relying on a lot of young kids. You're kind of in a weird spot if you're the Pittsburgh Pirates, right? You can't just go, okay, well, we got all this talent up here now, and we got all these kids getting started, but we want the playoffs next year, so we got to go out and get some free agents, right? And you and I have talked about the holes. They need some starting pitchers. They need a first baseman. If you really want to throw caution to the wind, they need an outfielder, right? Probably going to bring back Kutch. You got all these things to really, really go as far all in as you want. And I think the Pirates have that capability because I think if they were to go, hey, we're going to spend $125 million this year, that would considerably be all in for this club, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's some of these kids that ain't going to play. Is that smart?
Well, I just think you can. I guess it would depend on who it was that they got, or how they allocated that money. I do want to make that distinction with the Pirates is that I'm not talking 175 million payroll here. Not at all.
I think, to be honest, you're not talking about the Pirates at all for this conversation, because the only teams that have the capability of fluctuating to the degree you're talking about, where it's the difference between spending 250 million and 150 million, are the teams that can spend 250 million.
Sure.
So
yeah,
half the league's out of this conversation to begin with.
Yeah, which partly goes back to my bigger point, which is I do think because of how baseball is set up, there's just such a financial factor involved with teams. And so how can it not be in these, the have-nots compared to the haves? How can that not be playing an important factor in how you're doing things? And how much, to the extent, do you want to extend yourself to do this? And so when there's more teams, and I just get the feeling that it seems like, we've seen the talk of, well, this is how teams are looking at it, and this is how teams want to try to do it. Give yourself more chances to be good to get in, as opposed to shooting to be great at any point in time. I think if that happens, it's almost like a happy accident.
Yeah. There's another side of this.
That bothers me. I see your brain, your wheels are turning.
Well, there's another side of it too that I think gets lost in a lot of this. One of the big separators with these real gigantic teams like Los Angeles and New York and, the teams that can spend, who they are. They usually are carrying around $40 to $50 million in dead money too. Like, so their payrolls are way crazy more, but that's a lot of dead money too. So when you're talking actual player versus player, it's not nearly the gap that it looks like on paper a lot of the time.
Right.
Between at least the middle and the top, I would say. So I can see a way that this starts to work its way down, is what I'm saying, to some of the lower levels. But it's still not a Pirates conversation, this one. I just don't see them being in a position where that matters. I think for them, going all in would be like, one year they probably top out at 150, 160, somewhere in there, like right around where Milwaukee usually carried themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that?
At least realistically, after having watched Bob Nutting, I think that's as much as I can ask for, at least.
Right. I mean, we have to be realistic about, who we're dealing with in general, and then the overall overarching situation in baseball. Is it necessarily a Pirates conversation right this second? No, but I guess what I would ask is, or what I would say is, if we're talking about I think if you put two really nice pitchers on this staff, it changes things considerably. I think it would for a lot of teams, though. So
Yeah, 2 pitchers will get you a lot further along than 5 mediocre ones once you get to the postseason, right?
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, even look at the Dodgers. No matter how much money you spend, if you don't have your pitching in order when it's go time, you're probably going to be sabotaged by it. And they were kind of a mess as the end of the year approached.
Right. And here Josh is saying, spend 250 million and you win 100 games, but it doesn't mean anything once you get into the tournament. It's all about who gets hot, not who is the best. And I think, is this not playoffs for every sport? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what it is every year. It's why I like a team like the Steelers proudly backs into the playoffs as the 7th seed a couple years ago. Anything can happen once you're in. It's why we were also upset the Penguins lost to Chicago last year, because anything can happen once you're in, right?
And I think what people are doing is they're maybe, and I didn't do a good job. I've got so much going on right now. I didn't do a good job of verbalizing it right this on Twitter initially. People are very focused on how the playoffs are shaking out, and I really don't have an issue with sitting there and watching what's going on in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Again, for me, it's big picture. Do you want a bunch of teams that are adopting that policy during the regular season? In other sports, it's set up where the economics are so different, and that teams don't have the luxury of saying, well, we're only going to spend 60 million this year.
Let's take a team like Arizona, though, because,
and that's where this started. This was a Joe Block tweet, and he had mentioned about, hey, the Diamondbacks, they won 84 games. The Pirates were close to that. And now look, they're one game away or one series away from the World Series. So this is where this started.
They haven't lost a game yet this postseason.
Right.
But it's fair to say, no matter how generous you were with your projections of what Corbin Carroll was going to be, he's been every bit a superstar, like this whole season. I don't know if they necessarily expected they were going to be this good either. Really, Zach Gallen has never pitched this well before. Not this well.
Yeah.
I mean, and they have questions beyond like their number 2 pitcher, to be honest. So they were doing great and humming. And even when they got to the trade deadline, they were humming. Right after the trade deadline, they kind of fell back and got smacked in the face by the rest of the NL West.
To the point where it looked like they were going to miss the playoffs.
Yeah, and then they resurged towards the end. Come on, and they sneak into the playoffs. They back into the playoffs. But I don't think it's fair to say they were only 8 games better than the Pirates this year. I mean, the talent is really, really something that I think gets ignored in a straight up stat comparison, like right. the win totals on a season. I also think they showed no signs of not going for it or screwing up or thinking that they were, better than they were or accepting being an 85 win team. I think they were justified in thinking they were a really good team at the trade deadline. And before the season, you might have called them jumping the gun a little bit if they had tried to add more before the season, not really knowing how those pieces were going to come together or that young talent was going to evolve.
It's a fair point. I think too, it comes down to like a case by case basis of the team you're talking about, how things unfold, and then perhaps when you're looking at them going forward a little bit, and like when they're on like maybe what a fan base considers the precipice of being good, of being legitimately good. And so if the gap in baseball is widening between the haves and the have-nots, and I would suggest that it still is, And so you've got teams like the Royals or the Pirates or whoever you want to throw in that category. Does it make sense for them to ever try to get to the point where they're fully going for it in a year? And that to me is like the crux of my argument, which is, man, if you can never even feel like you can really go for it, that sucks. And I don't think that that's good for the game overall, because you're always under that umbrella of, well, why even try? Why even try to get to that point? We can't compete with that financially.
I guess. Yeah, again, I still think like there's more of a levels that you're looking for. You want to know like that in a series you've got two or three pitchers that are going to get wins for you or have a good shot of keeping you in a game. I don't think you have to have five of those. So to me, that's a big separator between those haves and have-nots. And I think that that's also going to create a different regular season record than postseason record. So your regular season record may end up being in the 90 plus, 95 plus win because you have five really good pitchers. But once you get to the playoffs, that doesn't matter. Are my two or three better than your two or three? That's really what it comes down to. And I think that's what the game has changed. And they've put so many breaks into these series, you don't need more than two or three. In fact, your four or five now become your awesome long man. Like that you
Yeah.
never really had on your in your bullpen before.
Yeah, baseball in general is so unique in the fact that you've got this crazy long season. I mean, 162 games out of how many, 200 and some days of the season that it's packed
Yeah.
into. And then it was a 1 game wild card, and now we're into 3, and then you're getting into 5, and you're not even into 7 games by the time we get to the championship series. And maybe that's just the bigger issue is like baseball's got this such a marathon. It's so long. And then we go into a very, very different type of atmosphere for the playoffs.
There's a lot of breaks built into it. And like to a certain degree, there always have been. There's always been travel days and whatnot. But I do think, you play 162 games where these guys are going back to back to back to back just about every game. And then you get to the playoffs, and all of a sudden we're taking all these breaks in between, and you don't need a full rotation anymore. And you don't have to worry about not blowing out your bullpen anymore because there's no real rest problems there. And you don't have to sit, your stud third baseman who has a back problem. And, and you don't even have the whole specter of, hey, your DH has to play defense now. So,
right. And you've got, especially I think about it, I guess you could do this on either side of things, but like pitching in your bullpens and they're not being used. Well, that's great from like a freshness perspective, but it doesn't take long for guys to start feeling out of sync. Your arm might be live better than it felt in July and August, but it's that disruption of that routine that they all have. And now then you add in on top of that, Gary, pressure, right? Pressure does a lot to people in general. So, yeah.
All right. So I saw a comment underneath your post about this, and it was a suggestion somebody had on maybe addressing this problem that you're identifying. And it was moving the trade deadline back to June 15th. And he basically said, like, you should kind of go in with the team that you built and see where it takes you instead of like this cherry picking teams that are the bottom feeders towards the end of every season to make your team into something it isn't. and it would maybe kind of cut down on some of the tanking a little bit that happens towards the end of seasons and change the dynamic a little bit. I haven't really 100% come to an opinion on it, but I thought it was so interesting I had to bring it up to you. I wish I could remember the guy's name. I think it was Jeffrey.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it much today. Um, that's interesting because that is another aspect to it. You mentioned it with the tanking part of it. Is you are seeing it the reverberations to all this is teams are willing to just completely tear it down and then wait 3, 4, 5 years to build it back up into something that they think that they can internally sustain, right? And so that to me is all tied into some of this. So I think like if we could just and if moving the trade deadline helps fight anything, I would be willing to at least explore it. I mean, I'd have to think about it more because we
I
always
would
talk.
think there'd be a lot less movement. I think it would almost turn into the old NFL trade deadline where, absolutely nothing got moved. You kind of just went in with the team you had because you didn't know what you were yet. You know,
Yeah,
you don't know if you're ready to wave the white flag or not. And if you're ready on June 15th to trade somebody, you probably shouldn't have rostered them. Like
yeah. Boy, June. Boy, that's early.
it's early, right? And
Ooh.
it's but it's not ridiculous. And you're talking about impact. That would be an impact move, right? You're impact moving that deadline that to get a reaction. You're
Mm-hmm.
trying to change something. I'm positive there are some unintended consequences that you and I have not even thought of yet to that whole thing that could just destroy baseball.
Yeah. But again, anything to like see, this is the thing too that I think that like I said before, clearly I didn't verbalize is like, man, I'd like to be able to keep guys in places longer. And when you sign guys that you hope to keep them and compete with them. And I think what we're seeing is teams are willing to just cut bait, move on, get out from under it. If you think you're not going to be good, tear it down. And so you're rarely seeing. We already were rarely seeing it, but now you're seeing it even less with players, in the sense that teams are signing guys with no intention, I think, of ever seeing those contracts through, except for a few.
I mean, let me tell you what I think is one of the worst examples of it. Really, I think the White Sox this year. This year, I thought they built something good. I thought they had a nice core of young players.
I thought so too.
I realize some of them haven't played well. I realize there's been injuries and they've tried. They went out and got free agents and whatnot. It was bad mixed players. I think they hired a crap coach and kind of wasted a year of their competitive window. But boy, did they give up quick. I mean, they didn't
Yeah.
even, I'm not saying like, hey, I'm not going to sit here and tell you bridge years work. But when you've got a nice core of young players, you like to think that you could go out and potentially do something, right? Instead, they trade one of these like really good young players that they've barely given a chance to Marlins in the middle of for no reason. Like they have nothing left but Robert now. They're probably going to trade Dylan Cease this offseason. Right? So what happened to them? I mean, like there was no effort whatsoever to hold on to the competitive window that they worked so hard to open. They were bad for a long freaking time to get there.
Yeah, and it really comes down to, I think, the organization itself, and that's why I mentioned about case by case basis is you are putting a lot of trust in an organization to quote unquote do the right thing or the hard thing. And I think we've just gotten to the point in baseball where it's very easy to do what the White Sox did, and it's a safer route to go. And so, Gary, take a look at the Brewers in the last 5 years. I think you know where I'm going with this. It's just a sense of they had some success, right? And I think they did pretty much everything they could possibly do. But nothing really came of it outside of getting into the postseason, right?
Yeah.
So is that just, hey, that's just the way it goes? Or should they have gotten and taken a bigger risk one of those years and done something a little bit more aggressive? I think my answer to that, I'll answer it first and then I'll let you go, is I just think that like they were trying to keep it together to see if they could extend their little window and see if one of those years worked out better.
I think they invested in Yelich, and they know that he's not going to be productive for probably the last 6 or 7 years of his time there. And probably felt like it's now or never as far as winning with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think they tried really hard. They actually made a great trade for Willy Adames. That was a terrific trade to get him from the Rays. We always say the Rays don't give up good players, but Willy Adames was a heck of a pull from them, and they didn't really die to do it. So they did a really good job there. They made another nice move to get Rowdy Tellez. He kind of helped them, gave them some power for a while, and they cultivated great pitching. That's really what set them apart, was their pitching. I don't think it's necessarily. I think Yelich has largely been a bad contract. I think they could be just as good a team spending a lot less had they not gone out and done that. And I would say they tried by doing that. You know what I mean? I feel like for that market that's smaller than Pittsburgh, I don't think people realize they're already stretching themselves. You know what I mean?
Then they felt the need to move Hader too, and that was an interesting thing to have to do.
Well, that bum will only pitch 1 inning. So
don't you dare ask him to go 4 outs.
Like, let's read a comment here from our buddy Craig. He says, the Dodgers have set a pace of 100-plus wins for 6 out of the past 7 years. They have won World Series. Not sure why this has been a discussion just this season. The new playoff format has same result. I agree. It has been the same result. LA, I think, has been built for regular season success for quite some time. And this year in particular, I think they were dealt quite a blow on the mound there unexpectedly. Yeah. I think that's a different team if they've got Urias and Walker Buehler. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
So, sure. That said, the Dodgers are probably getting close to, for them, what looks like a blow up. Now they'll be rebuilt within 2 years, but
right.
I mean, I think they're about to move on from some guys. Like Max Muncy's just about done there. Probably you're going to see Kershaw either pitch one more year or call it quits after that playoff performance again. But
well, the only thing I would say to that comment would be the difference now is that they've added more playoff teams. So to me, it increases the chances of, yes, getting in. But what does that mean for your, how do I say this? If you've got, if you're a fan of a team like the Dodgers and they get in and go, 7 years winning all those games, and you take a team like the Diamondbacks and they get in, is it luck, or are they just as good as the Dodgers? I would have to say that there's an element of randomness to it, that it's just simply about catching a team at the right time, which I'm fine with. It's just that I don't know that it's set up in the best way possible, if that makes sense.
And then there's Houston. 7 straight
Yeah.
ALCS, I mean, like, we talk about this randomness, but they were dealt the deadly delay this year that beat the Twins pretty handily. Like, they deal with injuries, they deal with bad draws in the structure of the playoff bracket. They just deal and do and keep going. And it's really hard to look at the system and say that it's completely fallen into that kind of disarray when that team exceptionally put together well, they're going to make it. Now, the other team that we always say is exceptionally put together is the Braves. And while our buddy Dave White here really hopes that the Braves get eliminated tonight, which could happen, folks, Dave is rooting for our cross-state rivalry. So, but but Atlanta, they're built great, right?
Definitely.
They do exactly what you want them to do. Really, really push in all the chips, right? They're spending what they can. They've got all these guys locked up. You want guys to stay in places longer. That's going to happen. And they're going to live and die with it. As those guys age out, they're going to be stuck with some of them, right? and they're going to block younger kids that are coming up in their system, and they're going to have to find ways to move on. And they've been a smart organization. They'll do it one way or another. But I'm not necessarily sure that they're built to have a peak or a valley in their payroll all that much. The way they've chosen to go about it is more stability. They're almost the Mike Tomlin of baseball. This is what we're doing. It's going to work till it doesn't work, and I'm going to die on this hill.
Yeah. Well, they're an exceptional case, but they have locked themselves into a certain type of payroll for a while. They're not going to be able to go much higher, nor are they going to be able to shed much either.
Or fill in holes if they do get nicked up real bad.
Right.
Because they're exceptionally healthy, believe it or not, even though they lost Ozzy Albies for a little while. And,
Yeah. They are to me almost in their own category of how they've done it. Houston to me is amazing because they seem to be immune to all this, right? They just keep winning. And I don't know if that just becomes of like, once that starts, you get this almost like the Phillies in the sense of just that confidence, man. When you start to feel that it's playoff time and it's time to go dominate, there's something to that, I think. I really do.
There is. Hey, so before we get to the next segment here, let's take another break real quick. When we come back, we got a special guest for everybody, an old friend making a visit to the old...
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
All right, welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Jim and I are super excited to welcome back to the show an old friend. If you don't know him, you probably don't live in Pittsburgh. Smitty, how you doing? From around the 412, welcome back.
Appreciate it. I was just sitting back there watching you guys do your thing for a few minutes there. As always, you guys know I enjoy your work. Appreciate you having me on. Excited to be here.
So I saw you guys were doing some pirate shows this year, so I know you've been following along all year. But
Little bit. What's funny is we did not do one this week. We put out a Steelers show, a Penguins show. I was like, what the heck are we gonna talk? I talk about that all the time on the show, though. I give you guys credit. Everybody else that does Pirates content year round, I'm like, I do not know how they do it, man. But
well, for one thing, you got to have an iron stomach so you can watch it.
yes,
But
that's true.
I don't know. We're
you're
sitting
just
here.
so-
We're talking about the Pirates trying to like move into the playoff picture next year, right? And Jim started out with the premise that he's tired of seeing some teams so willing to kind of just throw in the towel and rebuild and destroy and everything. You've been watching the playoffs a little bit.
Yeah.
You're watching some of these teams, they're enjoying the fruits of that. Arizona has torn down, and here they are coming out of the fires like the Phoenix. Houston, people forget, stunk out loud for about 5 straight years so that they could get to the point where they built this core that they have, to their credit, paid for and kept together and added to. Texas, perfect example of a rebuilding team. The Orioles, the Twins are constantly rebuilding. Philadelphia, even though they've added star power, built a lot of that team internally. Atlanta certainly has. LA always has. Brewers have. So every single one of these teams kind of took a back seat for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you as a fan take that in, Smitty? I mean, like, it's distasteful to watch, but damn it, it works.
It does, and I feel like, I mean, as a Pirates fan, you know, I'm just waiting to get to the fruits of that labor, like we're talking about here. But I think it's probably more frustrating for those teams that I'm not going to say can spend, but have seen their teams be willing to spend and then all of a sudden take a break from doing so to rebuild. I think that's where the frustration probably lies for those teams, because their fan base has watched them do things a certain way for so long, be successful doing it, and then say, okay, we're not going to spend right now. We're going to do things differently, and then we're going to add when the time is right. So I think it's just like
Boston
a
would be a
balance.
great
Yeah.
example of that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Boston's
yeah.
definitely have been in that mode.
Yeah. So I think it's like a
Texas, to a
balance, and
degree.
some
Texas
fans
tried to
just.
buy a championship not a decade ago. You know, it didn't work
Texas
out.
has been fun to watch too. Going into this playoffs, I really wanted Arizona versus Baltimore. Didn't go so well for Baltimore when they ran into the Texas Rangers, but that Texas team has been fun to watch. And I mean, I'm hoping, obviously, I don't know how we all feel here, but I'm hoping that they are who comes out of the American League and beats Houston in the next round. So
Just for
I'm
something
enjoying seeing what they're
different.
doing. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like we went into the playoffs, and the American League looked like it was pretty much like, compared to past years, you know, there's no Yankees there, there's no Red Sox there, looks pretty much wide open. And then here we are with the Astros still in the championship series, and hopefully it's not them that comes out of it.
So, Jim, I mean,
Yeah.
what do you think about what Smitty said there as far as dealing with it? I mean, he's going to see the fruits. He'll probably be okay with it for a few years there, and then right back to hating it once they decide to pull the plug again. What do you think?
You know, my question would be with Smitty to him is, you look at, is baseball just its own unique sport to watch, in the sense of, because when I think about the Steelers, right, or I think about the Penguins and the constant pushing to do everything that they can, seemingly to win championships, and you know, when you look at the Pirates and you look around at other teams that maybe aren't the big spenders, do you see that? Do you see the difference? Does it bother you as a fan in general? Do you see that? Is it okay that teams in baseball do it? Do we give them a pass if they don't want to do it that way? Is it okay? Do you think it is? Should it be okay?
Man, that's an interesting question. I don't even know where I want to start with that. Just because the way that I see it, like, every team in the NFL, this is going to sound stupid, but you'll get the point when I get there. Every NFL team on Sunday, you know that they're NFL teams. Every team in the NHL, those are NHL teams. I almost feel like with baseball, there's such a disparity that it almost seems like they're not all MLB teams at times. Like, you have the teams that are spending to what their limit is internally, and you have teams at the lower levels too. I feel like, depending on where a team is at within their their build, rebuild, whatever stage it might be. It just seems like there's so much more disparity in baseball between the teams at the top and the teams at the bottom as opposed to the other leagues.
And and then I would say in baseball too, this is where it's unlike the other leagues. The Orioles, clocking in probably around 70 million, had over 100 wins this year.
They did.
Arizona is 4 wins away from the World Series. They're probably about 75.
I mean, and the Rays do it all the time. You
Rays
know,
do it all the time. So, I mean, I guess it gives and it takes. I guess to me, every team is capable of spending 75 million and trying to win. Not every team is capable of spending 250 and trying to win. I'll never get over that disparity because it's always going to be there. That's
right,
and that sucks. But the NFL, I think we've seen tanking. We've seen Miami do it. We've seen Cincinnati do it. Or just recently, I think we've seen Indianapolis do it recently. So I don't know. I mean, it just doesn't take as long in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's it, right? Like you can tank in an NFL season a lot differently and maybe a little bit more forgivably because you could turn it around really fast if you wanted to. And in baseball, it's really just not that. It's just not possible. So you're going to put a fan base through 3, 4, 5 years of ugliness just to get a chance to get back to where you might be competitive again and hopefully do something with it once you get there. But God forbid you fail once you get to that 3, 4, 5 years. And we're about to find out with the Pirates how that goes.
Man, you know what would help, I think?
Another 3, 4, 5 years? Boy, now you're talking a long time.
What if Major League Baseball finally allowed draft picks to be traded? Because I think you're never going to stop teams from the allure of retooling with youth. What if you just said, okay, screw it. Go out there and trade for a bunch of number 1 picks and get it done in a couple years.
You should be allowed to, and I think in baseball, because of all the disparity with the economic, just how the game is structured, I think you should be able to explore whatever avenue you want to. And if it's going to do it through the draft and trades and picks, I'm all for it. All for it. Because
that thought has never been.
What would that do to the game?
I don't know. I try to that thought has never entered my mind because it's not a thing. Why isn't it though? Why is it in place right now?
I actually know the answer to this question.
Okay, good.
It's not in because Major League Baseball wanted to save the teams from their own impulses to trade their number 1 picks and stink forever because they never truly bring any talent in. It's old and outdated, but a long time ago, that's what they thought would happen. And
I would say that
before free agency, and they've just held on to it forever.
I would say that it's probably time to revisit that then, and I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't been, more of a topic than it is.
I mean, they let you trade compensatory picks, so it's not that much of a stretch. It feels like the way they hand out draft picks like candy too. Now we're giving them out for playing a rookie, at a certain time, and if they're rated somewhere by some arbitrary system that decided they're in some list. I mean, baseball's already bastardized their own roles 100,000 times. I'm just saying, allow people to trade draft picks, and I think you could have these rebuilds take 2-3 years as opposed to 4 or 5. And I think it's a lot more palatable.
Now, what if you could trade picks for picks or picks for players? Current players.
Yeah, you should.
What I'm thinking of is the Pirates situation with Skeens, right? Okay, you've got the number 1 pick, and let's just say it was Skeens and nobody else, right? This potentially generational pitcher, right? And you're sitting where you are with the Pirates right now, and you've got another team that says, you know what? we're ready to take Skeens right now. We are loaded in the minors. We have all this talent, or we have this guy that, however you want to piece this together, right? Why shouldn't they be able to explore those situations? Why not?
I think they should be. And I think
Yes,
some
I agree.
teams would be stupid with it. And I also think that it's a funny thought that you can't trade that guy, because the Pirates traded Shane Baz immediately after picking him.
Hmm.
They just made him a player to be named later and did it like later on. I mean, like, it's not as though it can't be done. So, I mean, you'd get crucified for it, but I mean, it's something that certainly can be done. Smitty, we should let you get to the point of why you're on the show, because it's
I
that
I
time
do
of
want to go
year.
back. I actually want to take a step back to something that I feel like was being talked about when I came in, and then we briefly touched on, just in terms of like the process for teams. I think, teams that have, because you mentioned the Orioles, we mentioned the Rays are consistently there, with lower payroll. I think it's like you got to see the results from teams being able to do that, though, to believe in it. Like if the Pirates were contending with a $70 million payroll or something like that, then I can buy into the idea that they can consistently do that, like the Rays, but we just haven't seen it come to fruition yet.
The Rays are actually the antithesis of what you're talking about, Jim. I mean, like, well, actually, no, they're the perfect example of what you're talking about. They're always in. Sure, they got 99 wins this year, but that ain't what they're shooting for. They're shooting for being competitive, getting into the playoffs. That's what they're doing. And they were dealt a heavy blow losing Wander Franco, obviously, and a lot of pitching injuries as well. So who knows what could have happened with that team. But you would never say the Rays are pushing all their chips in. Never.
No.
And and it's never resulted in a World Series. So to you, you're basically saying, no, that is exactly what I don't want to see. I want to see a team go, this is the year. I need this one piece. Here it is. Let's do it. Right?
Yeah, I think you're just encouraging teams to not want to do that for a variety of reasons in baseball. And so yes, the Rays have done a phenomenal job. They still haven't gotten to the top. And it's very hard to keep doing what they're doing. And
like Daniel says, and they can't even fill the stadium in the postseason. Absolutely.
Yeah, well,
I mean, think about how taken for granted getting to the playoffs is for the Rays fan base. They get there all the time. It doesn't matter because they're not winning, but they get there all the time. It's I harken back to the Mike Tomlin argument for why he's not a great coach, because just getting to the playoffs doesn't matter. You got to win too, right? Well, Tampa doesn't win. So I don't know, man. Maybe you have something there with, like, there needs to be some mechanism that forces teams to want to put in that extra effort. But this playoff, at least, boy, having that great record didn't help. So.
Yeah, let me just say this last thing, and then we'll get to something very important that I know that Gary also supports. I guess what I'm thinking of is like the mentality in football and hockey is, especially for teams that are dead serious about competing, is, man, the goal is to win a title. The goal is to win a championship. And I almost feel like baseball's gotten to the point where we're like, well, we'll get there. We'll get there a lot. That's still a good success. Like, hey, that's successful. And I just think that that's a different mentality born out of the situation that baseball finds itself in. And I just feel bad for fans, because fans aren't going to see it that way. But I think GMs and organizations in general start to think in different terms in baseball. Hey, we made it 6 out of 10 years. That's pretty good. Yeah, we didn't win anything. Isn't that good, guys?
Yeah.
I just think that, like, we're even getting talked into that as we watch baseball these days.
Well, let's go ahead and get a salary cap so we can complain about who doesn't manage the cap well. You know,
I'll take that any day.
yeah. So, Smitty, we wanted to have you on the show because we know it's getting. There was a crisp in the air the other day, and I was like, "Oh my God, Smitty! This dude, this dude starts his awesome charity work in the fall every year, and I want you to talk about it. I want to give you a little bit of an extra push, hopefully, from our show, a little bit to help get your message out there."
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate, the support that you guys have showed the mission over the years since starting it, and obviously appreciate the platform to talk about it right now. But yeah, so Gary mentioned host a podcast called Around the 412. Started that in 2017, and pretty much immediately, myself, my co-host Tyler Weeks, and at the time we also had a third host, Herb, with us, and we decided we wanted to find a way to give back to the Pittsburgh community in any way that we can. No matter big or small, whatever it ended up being. So we just started a GoFundMe, called it Rocking Around the 412. We knew it wanted to be like a Christmas-based mission. All of us were very fortunate to never have to worry about where Christmas was coming from growing up. Grew up in very fortunate households, and Tyler and I especially just, never had to worry about having presents to open on Christmas. So that was kind of the idea behind starting the mission. First year went pretty well. We raised about $1,500. And at that point, the first year that we did it, what we did is we bought a bunch of gifts from a list from this 24/7 pediatric center in Aliquippa, everything that they would need for the kids that they took care of there. And that was a very humbling experience for me to go there and see those kids and stuff, just because, like I said, 24/7 care, like the parents are the visitors in that situation. You know what I mean? So, and I can't imagine ever being in that circumstance. So that was what we did year one. Year two, I had a friend, and his sister was in a really bad situation. She had 3 kids, and I was like, man, should we maybe consider this being like how we do the Christmas mission, is providing Christmas to kids like this, directly in our areas, the 724 and 412 areas, so we can really like see where this money is going. So year 2 to where we're at now with year 6, that's the way that we've done it. Every single penny that is donated just goes to providing Christmas in its entirety to these families. So that's getting the kids every single item on their Christmas list, as well as a $100 gift card for the families to a Walmart or whatever their local grocery place is, to be able to provide a holiday meal for them as well, because that's something else that's also taken for granted by a lot of people. But certainly, like I said, with Tyler and I never having to worry about those types of things growing up, we wanted to make sure that at least, for one day, these people, these families got to experience something that Tyler and I were very fortunate enough to have growing up. And then last year was the first year that we did this, but it's something that we're going to do going forward as well, every single year, and also along with, directly impacting these families that we are basically nominated through other people who they're going to be.
I was gonna ask you that, Zach, is how does that work? How do you end up finalizing a list?
Yeah, so we have just nominations of families. I like to have a little bit of background in terms of the family as well. And not that I would, want to deny people or anything like that, but there is, a certain amount of money, obviously, that we raise. So there, I try to do something for every single family. Now, what that amount might be or what we can do is going to vary. But I think a really good example is a couple years ago, there was a girl that actually went to the same high school as me that was fighting breast cancer. Sadly, she lost her battle that Thanksgiving, and we provided Christmas in its entirety to her 2 children. And that was just, again, you go into some of these places, you hear about the situations, and it breaks your heart that, people have to go through these types of things, especially with those 2 kids at such a young age and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, we're really about like, the stories and the situations that need it the most. But I was saying last year, we started partnering up with the East Rochester, PA Salvation Army as well. Not sure if a lot of people are familiar with their angel tree that they do at Christmas time, but they have a tree that literally has tags on it, like a kid's name in their list. So last year we were able to adopt 15 children from the East Rochester Salvation Army, along with the families that we helped out. And we're going to continue to do that, because how that started, last year I lost one of my friends, Dalton Keene, back in October. And when I reached out to his girlfriend about providing Christmas for their daughter, she was like, hey, listen, from a financial standpoint, like, we're good. We have so many people that want to help us out. Can we instead adopt kids from the Salvation Army in Dalton's name? And I mean, that was like the most, like, I'm about to get emotional on here.
Don't do it to me. Don't do it to me, Smitty.
So Like I said, last year was the first year that we did that, but we absolutely want that to continue as well. So we became official partners of the East Rochester Salvation Army last year. And why I specifically, first off, that's 7 minutes from me, East Rochester, being that I'm in Monaca, but also they are, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, they also operate as a food bank. They have a church in their building as well. And every single kid that goes there for after school programs, they teach an instrument. So they do so many different things over there that I don't think a lot of people realize from the Salvation Army. So we're just super honored to be able to partner up with them as well every single year for Christmas. So yeah, through 5 years of doing this, we've raised over $25,000. This is going to be year 6, obviously, and we think it's going to be our best year yet, thanks to people like Gary and Jim here and everybody that shows us support.
It's awesome, man. So how do people find it? Just on social media or?
Yeah, I have a direct GoFundMe link that I can send you if you wanted to put it in the description of the show or something like that. But yeah, it's on our social media. It stays our pinned post on X for the duration. Facebook, you can find us as well. Instagram, whatever social media platform you're into, we are there at Around the 412 as well, and it's our pinned post on all those platforms. So the GoFundMe also has, if you're familiar with GoFundMe, we'll give you the full rundown of the mission, kind of like I just did, probably a little bit more in depth. I'm sure I'm forgetting some details. But yeah, all the information's right there. And yeah, it's been like I call it my baby. I think it's the most important thing that Tyler and I do, and don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So we're really excited about year 6.
It's great stuff, man. And just getting to know you over the years and what this mission really means to you. I do think about it every single year, and I love what you've done. And I hope everybody that's listening, if you have some spare, please help out, because it is good, and I've seen the evidence of it being used. So I know where it's going, and I think that's something that we should all be excited about, and we know it's going local too. So good stuff.
Yeah, man. I look at it this way, like we all do our thing with social media and podcasts and whatever. Nothing is more important than this endeavor you guys have taken on. I always give you and Tyler so much respect for it, because there are people that like to talk a good game out there and act like they're people that are a little holier than that. You guys are actually doing things and making a difference and impacting people at a time.
And relatively quiet about it too.
Yeah, that's the other thing is you guys let me brag on you a little bit, because I think it's just incredible, because Christmas, the holidays, man, it's so needed.
To know Smitty is to love him. So, hey, listen to his show, Around the 412. He and Tyler do a great job covering all the sports. And they know where they're deficient, too, on the Buckeyes, right?
We also know where to send people on what we're deficient on.
That's right. So, hey, good stuff. And good talking baseball with you guys again. So, hey, until next week, let's finish the show the way we always do. We'll toss it off to Ben, and I'll say it for you watching on video. Let's go, Bucks.